The picture made this family look so beautiful. The problem was, if you stood inside this family long enough, your body told a very different story. This is a story about a son who learned how to disappear so well, people called him easy. About a daughter who kept being turned into the problem every time she would name what everyone else was trying to ignore. About another daughter who looked from the outside like the lucky one. And a mother who believed she was loving all of her children equally while slowly narrowing the circle around the one who made her feel the safest. This is part 2 of the Golden Curse. Brandon is 13, sunburned and sweaty. He stands on the back steps of his Grandma Lorraine's house with one shoe untied and the smell of fresh cut grass on his shirt. He's just dragging out the last 30 seconds of daylight. The window over the kitchen sink is open and he can hear his grandma inside rinsing the plates from dinner. Someone's dog is barking 2 houses down, a screen door slams somewhere off in the distance, and Brandon, he can faintly hear the baseball game coming from the neighbor's garage. It's just one of those evenings that it's just so ordinary you would never think to remember because it's just not that important. And yet Brandon remembers it. Brandon's your typical kid. He loves summers, biking with friends, playing cards with grandma, and making his own money mowing lawns. Night after night, he comes home just dirty, dusty, and already planning how soon he can leave again the next day. He's been told his entire life that he is the easiest child, so independent, low maintenance, never one of those clingy kids. He's just always on the go. Just a good boy, healthy and becoming himself. And maybe that's part of it. But at 13, Brandon doesn't sit on his grandma's back step thinking, this is where my body unclenches, or I would rather be here than in my own kitchen. No, he just thinks summer should last forever, and my grandma is so fun, and she makes the best grilled cheese sandwiches. Later, when people ask Brandon, what were you like as a kid? This is the version he keeps. Always out and about, loving life and loving freedom. And if you don't know what comes later, sounds like a pretty dang good childhood. Before we begin, hi, I'm Jess. I'm your Boundary Big Sister. And on this channel, my husband and I, we just talk about like really messy family dynamics so you can feel less alone and understand what's really going on. If you want to support our mission, please hype this video. And if you would like, you can become an MYB member by tapping the join button below, where you'll get instant access to exclusive content plus ad-free episodes. All right, let's get back to the Hellcats. Remember from part 1, the Hellcats are a family everyone wanted to be a part of. Ruby, the matriarch, she loves you in detail. She's very, very attentive. Whether you're her child, an in-law, you bumped into her at Target, you trust her and her maternal energy instantly. The home she built with her husband Dale is where their 3 adult children and their families gather for holidays, birthdays, and, well, just spontaneous dinners after Sunday church. The Hellcats, they look completely, well, nearly perfect in a big wide shot. The trouble starts when you get close up. Ruby thinks she's a good mom. Dale believes he's a steady dad. And Brandon knows he's the easy one. His sister Rachel, she actually wonders sometimes, like, am I the problem? Even though every nerve in her body screams, no, you're not. And the baby of the family, Katrina, she defines family by how close you are. All of them in their own way, they're telling you the truth, just not the whole truth. Brandon, the oldest, the first time his wife Kenzie noticed that he gets a certain look on his face before every family gathering, they weren't even married yet. It was a spring day. They were in a parking lot at a restaurant where Ruby had decided, let's all meet for Rachel's birthday. Brandon was holding the door of his blue Chevy truck with one hand, the keys in the other, and he was staring straight ahead at nothing. Kenzie asked him if he was okay, and he smiled, but she could tell like he was already a little gone. She didn't make a big deal about it. She just took note. And through the years, that has become one of the most consistent patterns in their marriage. There's Brandon in regular life. He cooks breakfast, remembers to sign the planners. He knows which child will cry when the pancakes are a little too brown. He is the guy Kenzie married. But then there's this other Brandon before family get-togethers. This version is really quiet. He gets a tone. He's got a flat affect, and he answers questions from his family like he's trying to conserve energy. Kenzie can feel it long before he says a thing. Sometimes it's days before they're set to see his family. So by the time their kids come along, she has seen this pattern enough times, she knows that it isn't random. One Sunday before she went to her in-laws for Easter, Kenzie found him in the mudroom holding their daughter Olivia's shoes in one hand with that look on his face. It was like he was standing in two worlds at the same time. The house was full of that regular family chaos. Olivia needed help with her bow right now. Kenzie had just walked into the mudroom to set down her cooler bag full of deviled eggs, and that is where she found Brandon standing there, just so still. She took the shoes from him and asked if he was good. He shrugged and said, yeah, but she didn't accept it and look away like she normally did. She just stayed there with her eyes fixed on him. And finally, he got to the point where he broke his composure, leaned back against the wall, drug his hand down his face, and he just said, I just don't want today to feel weird. Kenzie exhales. He doesn't let her into this side very often. And it's not like he said he didn't want to go or mention that his dad always disappears with Katrina's husband and leaves him feeling this some sort of way, like he doesn't understand what's wrong with him. Why doesn't his dad interact with him? No, he just said weird. And that's how Brandon talks about his family. Weird, a lot, nothing, fine, it's whatever. Just family stuff. Language that doesn't slow him down long enough to actually feel what he's feeling. Kenzie steps closer, wraps her arms around him and says, it already feels weird to you. You're just hoping it doesn't get worse. And with that, his whole body exhales and relaxes into hers, because this is as close to honesty that they will get that day. By the time they get loaded into the truck, Tyler's being too loud, Olivia's being sensitive, and Jacob, he's just doing that teenage thing where he disappears into his earbuds and screen. And Brandon, he's fine. He quietly puts the truck in reverse and backs out of the driveway. He always does better when he stays in motion. But here's the thing. The confusing part for Kenzie is how Brandon only remembers fragments of his childhood. He basically has zero memories being together as a family. This is the family everyone wants to join. Remember that. No father-son moments. Like, it's all just a blur. Yet there is one person that he remembers crystal clear, but if he stays in those memories too long, he falls apart. Literally, he starts crying like a young child. It's just odd how few stories Brandon has versus the way Ruby, his mom, tells it, and how often Brandon's childhood memories happened away from home instead of inside of it. Again, Brandon has never stood still long enough to examine why this is, and why would he? He's a grown man. He's got a beautiful wife, kids, a house. I mean, he's busy. He's got no reason digging around blurry stuff trying to understand why these stories don't match up. No, he just keeps moving, reminds himself that his childhood was great. He had freedom and friends and the best grandma anyone could ask for. That's the version he gives himself, and for a long time, that's enough until it isn't. There are moments though, super tiny ones, where that easy breezy independent story gets a hairline crack through it. Like last month, they were over at Ruby's house for Bobby's construction themed party. Remember, Bobby is Katrina's oldest boy and Katrina is Brandon's sister. Ruby went all out. We're talking orange safety cones, hard hats, a cake shaped like a dump truck. It was the kind of effort where everyone was like, oh my goodness, Mom, you did not have to do all this, all the while knowing Ruby totally wanted to. Brandon was standing by the window with his Pepsi in hand. He loves his Pepsi. When Bobby came barreling down the hallway wearing his plastic hard hat, and Ruby's face just filled with joy so easily. And it might sound petty, because obviously a grandma's gonna light up when she sees a birthday kid, like boys in tiny construction hats, like, come on. Yet Brandon saw it. He saw how fast that joy came so effortlessly. And Kenzie saw Brandon noticing, and she also saw their oldest Jacob watching too. No one said anything, but that's also why this is so hard and so painful, because most of the time, these moments, they happen in ordinary times and they can be explained away. Well, it was a birthday party. He was adorable. The little kid in a hard hat running down with a reflector vest on. Later that night, Olivia, Brandon's little girl, asked if Grammy likes the boys better. Kenzie sat on the edge of her bed and told the gentlest version she could think of. Well, no, Grammy just gets really excited when everything gets centered on one thing. Olivia thought for a while and then she asked, was Bobby that one thing? Kenzie smiled even though it hurt like crazy and said, yes, today Bobby was that one thing. Brandon heard about it later. He didn't say much, which that's another thing that Brandon's really good at doing. He puts things in a box and then he sits on the lid. But let's take a break from Brandon and let's talk about his sister, Rachel. Remember, Rachel is the middle child of Ruby and Dale, and she was 7 the first time she realized the room could get colder without anyone touching the thermostat. It happened on her birthday. There were streamers taped up crooked across the doorway, grocery store cake, and Katrina, her little sister, standing on the chair, helping hand out plates. Rachel had a stomach ache, not the kind you'd come home from school for, but it's just this like sharp little drop. The feeling you get when something's unfair and no one's slowing down long enough to notice. Rachel's slice of cake is noticeably smaller than Katrina's, and it's her birthday and no one's noticing. Or if they did notice, no one thought it mattered. Not one person paused and said, hey, wait a minute, that's not quite right. So 7-year-old Rachel looks at her plate, then looks at Katrina's plate, and then she looks at her mom, Ruby. And Ruby's laughing at something Dale said from across the room. Grammy Lane, Ruby's mom, she's at the end of the table, just taking in the whole scene, kind of like she's judging, even though she would swear she wasn't. Rachel stared at the frosting on her fork and felt something that she would spend the next 32 years trying to describe clear enough for someone else to say, yes, I know exactly what you mean. You're not crazy. And she just started to cry. Ruby turned and saw the tears, looked at the plates. She smiled really tightly as if she was trying to say without saying it, like, stop it. Like, you're making me look bad in front of my mother. And then she says, Rachel, it's just cake. You can have more. Stop it. Stop being so sensitive. That sentence stays. At 7, it was because of cake. At 12, it was because she said something out loud everyone else was pretending not to hear. And at 23, it was because she asked why every holiday had to happen the same way every single year. Otherwise, it turned into a moral emergency. And finally, at 39, it's because she's sitting in a booth with her daughters and her mom, Ruby, when Ruby picks up a FaceTime call from Katrina in the middle of lunch and gives Katrina the warmest next 11 minutes while Rachel and her girls quietly just sit there waiting for Grandma to return to the table. Rachel just knows something's off long before she has any useful language to explain it. The room changes around her little sister Katrina. And I know this sounds like jealousy. Like she's just holding a clipboard and tallying up points because she can't stand not being the center. That's not what it feels like to her. Inside of Rachel, for her, it feels like a temperature change. It lives in how fast her mom answers Katrina, in the way that her face just lights up, or in the look that Rachel catches and then immediately starts trying to talk herself out of. This all exhausts Rachel, by the way. Not only does she feel that temperature shift, but then she spends years arguing with herself about whether she is allowed to trust what she feels. Maybe mom is tired. Maybe Katrina needed more that day. Maybe I'm reading too much into this. This all taught her to mistrust her own body, even though no one taught her that lesson directly. Rachel gets so good at this, like arguing with herself. She feels something and then she cross-examines herself and edits it into something more presentable. And then she's told that she's too much anyway. Rachel is 12 when she says the thing that everyone remembers as rude, and she remembers it as obvious. It was a Tuesday. They were having pork chops, baked rice, and green beans with slivered almonds. Dale, her dad, was quiet. Brandon was just eating as fast as he could so he could get out the door again. And Katrina was talking about a spelling test that she did really good on. And Ruby's face, it just looks so soft. And Rachel sees it and she feels this drop in her chest. And she says, why do you always look happier when Katrina is talking? The room stops. Brandon looks down at his plate. Dale looks at Rachel, then at Ruby. Katrina freezes with her fork halfway up. And Ruby says very evenly, what an ugly thing to say. So you can see the clear rule Rachel learned very young, that noticing something and then saying that something out loud are two completely different things, and only one gets you in trouble. Now at that dinner, she tried to say that's not what she meant, but Ruby just looked at her like she was an inconvenience and said, "You need to stop looking for problems where there aren't any, Rachel May. Everything doesn't have to be a fight." By the time Rachel is old enough to understand these roles, the words have already made themselves at home inside of her. Rachel doesn't keep pushing because she loves drama. She keeps pushing because there's just some younger part of her that still believes that if she just says it careful enough, kindly enough, clear enough, the truth might finally land in her mom in a way that she finally sees her. That's why at 39, she's still picking up the phone to call her mom to present an injustice just to see if finally, this time she will. This is so painful because Rachel doesn't just hurt, she hopes. And that hope is what keeps her tethered. Most of the time, Rachel leaves these family visits furious. And then on the drive home, she's just questioning her tone. She'll tell her husband, Waylon, like she's done. She's absolutely done this time. And then the next day, she'll answer her mom's phone call as if nothing actually happened. Her daughter, Bria, is 8, the first time she says something that keeps Rachel up for 3 nights. They're in the car coming home from Ruby's after just a regular Sunday. Katrina's family was there too. They had bought bikes for the boys. So the whole afternoon was basically watching Bobby and Cole on bikes. And whenever Cole would fall over, Ruby would rush to his aid as if the ground was going to open up and swallow him whole. Basically a typical afternoon. So riding home, Bria was in the back seat and her arms were crossed. Now, Rachel catches it in the mirror, and after a while, Bria's like, "I don't think Grandma likes me." Rachel's hands tighten on the wheel, and she asks, "What do you mean?" And Bria explains how Grammy looks right past her to see Bobby and Cole. He just shoots up the back of her neck, almost makes her feel dizzy. Waylon, Rachel's husband, turns from the passenger seat and asks, "Honey, did something specific happen today?" And Bria just shakes her head and said no. "But it does feel like if I disappeared, I don't think Grandma would notice." Rachel almost has to pull over the car, but she doesn't. She just keeps it going straight, even though she feels like the whole world is just splitting wide open. This is the worst part of having kids inside of a family like the Hellcats. The injuries, again, they are wrapped in ordinary moments. One child, well, now one grandchild, gets held closer to the center while the other stands just outside of the warmth. They're close enough to feel it, but never close enough to live in it. And Rachel has spent most of her life trying to explain this without sounding insane. That night, after her girls are asleep, Rachel, she's in the kitchen rinsing plates that are already rinsed, and her husband Waylon comes up behind her, wraps his arms around her waist, and asks if she's okay. Rachel, she sets down the plate, rests her hands on the farmhouse sink, and she just shakes her head and says, "She noticed." Waylon rests his chin on top of her head and whispers, "I know." Rachel just stares at the white fire clay, and suddenly she's not just carrying her own grief. Now she's watching it reach for her daughters. She then just feels something shift inside of her, even if that shift is still too quiet to name. Let's switch gears now to our matriarch, Ruby. Ruby would tell you that she loves her 3 adult children the exact same, and she would 100% mean it. And I'm telling you, if Ruby were cold and calculating or cruel, this story would be so easy. But Ruby is a lot harder than that. Remember, she's the one who makes you feel like you matter. She pays attention. She knows which grandchild needs the crust cut off when they're tired, or that Olivia is the only one that gets a rash from Target's generic brand of sunscreen. She shows up with soup, diapers, and a toilet paper haul from Costco. Ruby is a daughter, a worker, a host, a organizer, a mother, a grandmother, the one who remembers, who shows up, and those roles fit her beautifully until her mother dies. The call comes in on a Thursday morning. Ruby's at work. She's halfway through responding to an email when her phone lights up with the hospital number. So she picks up without hesitation, thinking the call is about a task that she just needs to add to her list. But she quickly recognizes the tone, and the whole world comes to a screeching halt. When people outside of the family talk about Elaine, Ruby's mom, they use words like strong and so with it. She had a way of sitting in a room that made everyone else sit up just a little bit straighter without really understanding why. There was something about Elaine that always made her seem a half a beat ahead of everyone else around her. Ruby loved her so completely, and she spent most of her life reaching for her. When Elaine was pleased, oh my gosh, Ruby just floated. A compliment from Elaine carried her longer than it should have, while criticism flattened her entire week. But Ruby never saw it that way. She would say she was really close with her mom, 2 peas in a pod, that family was really important to Elaine. Still, when Elaine dies, something larger than grief moves through Ruby's life. She doesn't fall apart in public, nothing like that, but Ruby does what she always does, which is she gets really busy. She calls Rachel, lets her know to bring some shoes over, calls Brandon, leaves a voicemail because he's at work, calls Katrina last, who's already sobbing. Ruby just continues to check off the boxes as she's planning the funeral. Call the family, check. Where will people sit? Check. Book the organist? Check. And at the visitation, people just keep taking her hands and saying the same thing over and over. You're so strong, Ruby. You're just like her. You're going to keep everyone together. And Ruby just keeps nodding, accepting casseroles, just keeps making decisions, and almost looks serene, which makes people admire her even more. No one sees what actually left Ruby's life that day. She didn't just lose a mother. She lost her center of gravity. But that's actually too much truth for part 2, so let's just say it how Ruby would say it. She misses her mom. Some days are harder than others. Grief is a very strange thing, but you gotta keep going. And so she does. She goes back to work, back to her color-coded binders, full calendars, and people needing her. Work helps so much. It gives shape to her day and makes Ruby feel useful. But a few years later, retirement comes. They throw her a party. So many people come up to tell Ruby how indispensable she has been for decades. They got her a cake, they signed a card, and they meant it when they say, we don't know what we're gonna do without you. They even gave her a framed department photo of 61 faces in rows. It's the kind of photo that really looks stiff when you're at work, but somehow when you bring it home, it really feels like something. Ruby actually hangs this photo in her hallway between the wedding pictures and the family portrait they took 4 years ago with Elaine front and center. For the first few days, she passes it, she stops, and just feels this small lift in her chest. Like it's proof that she mattered. People really counted on her. She didn't just spend years of herself pouring into something invisible. She also keeps the card open on the counter for nearly 2 weeks, and every now and again, she'll stop, pick it up, and read the messages. You were the glue. We'll be missing you. No one kept us on track the way you did. Every time she stops, she just smiles. But then a Tuesday came. Not the first Tuesday, later than that. Late enough that no one's calling to ask if retirement feels amazing yet. It's 10 in the morning. It's the hour that really gets her. For decades, 10 in the morning, that was just the thick of things. Phone calls, questions, scheduling, approvals. A body moving with purpose through a role she knew how to perform. 10 o'clock used to have shape. Now 10 o'clock is a clean kitchen and a wall calendar with almost nothing on it. Ruby, she stands at her sink, coffee has gone cold, and she's looking out into her backyard like maybe there's something out there that she's supposed to notice. But nothing moves, and the silence just feels so empty. So she decides to fill that space. She cleans the counters, buys new towels for the spare bathroom, organizes the junk drawer, learns how to make sourdough bread, and when the air still feels heavy, she texts Katrina, her baby girl, and asks if the boys need anything. The text reply comes back quick. Katrina does need help with Bobby so she can take Cole to Target. Oh, thank gosh. There it is. The immediate return to shape to Ruby's day. She is needed. And that's really how all of this begins to unravel. Small enough that nobody clocks it, and reasonable enough that nobody gives it a name. Just a few afternoons here and there, then some mornings, but there isn't a standing agreement because that would be just too much. From Ruby's side, she's just helping Katrina, loving the boys, just enjoying the season, and being really grateful that she has the time that she didn't have before. And it feels so much better than her kitchen at 10 in the morning with nobody needing a thing. Ruby would never say that part out loud, but she might say that Some of her children are just easier to let her stay involved. Like Rachel, she tends to complicate things. Brandon, he's too self-sufficient to have her around. And when it boils down to it, Katrina, she just simply lets her help. The trouble is that life, once it's left alone, it starts arranging itself around the same comfort again and again. But she's not choosing one child and rejecting the others. No, she's just moving towards the place where she still feels most useful. And that feeling gives her a full body exhale. And since this is the story she tells herself, she never has to hold still long enough to ask, what does this look like from anywhere else in the room? Now let's peek into Dale's world for a moment. Dale, Ruby's husband, thinks he's a good father. He, like Ruby, loves to feel useful, needed, and appreciated. Dale is the first to show up at Katrina's to help Tommy with a project. He lets little Bobby hand him tools. I mean, I'm telling you, just like before, patience of a saint. For Dale, tasks are simpler than feelings, and projects, they're easier than fatherhood. Let's just say a loose railing is easier to deal with than a son who says really little and yet somehow makes you feel really judged even when he's just standing there by the window holding a Pepsi. Dale spends a lot of time at Katrina's just doing practical things. Brandon sees this. Rachel sees this too. Brandon doesn't have a neat sentence for it, but he feels the void or the lack of effort coming his or Rachel's way, just like he feels it in the blank spots where other people seem to have memories of their father. It's just weird when he's around his dad for some reason, almost embarrassing the amount of distance that's between them, even though they're in the same room. But let's actually put a pin in Dale because we have so much to talk about him in part 3, so let's move on to Katrina. When Katrina was little, and I'm talking real young, she learned that there's a version of daughterhood that is really easy. And she learned it by watching what happened to Rachel. Rachel would push, the room would get hard. Katrina would soothe, and the room would loosen. Ruby also didn't help. She would say things in passing that she didn't think were a big deal, but landed deep inside Katrina's body. Don't grow up to be your sister. I'm begging you, don't make life this hard. Whatever you do, don't be like Rachel. She would make these comments over dishes, driving Katrina to volleyball, or after one of Rachel and Ruby's knockdown, drag out fights in the kitchen. Katrina hears those lines as instructions. Her mom, Ruby, is helping her. She's letting her in on a little secret. By the time Katrina's old enough to realize there's a pattern, it already feels like her personality. Katrina doesn't think, I am the favored child. She just thinks, I'm easier to love. People call Katrina mature by the age of 10, and she's the one who knows how to make the room not feel heavy. It feels so good for her to be known for these things, especially when she sees what Rachel gets known for. Katrina learns the emotional economy of this family, and she discovers very early on where the safety lives, and that is very close to Ruby. By the time Tommy, Katrina's husband, enters the picture, Katrina has lived inside of that role for so long, she doesn't even know it's a role. She believes 1000% that this is who she is. And to everyone else in her life, it looks like Katrina is winning. She won. She has access to the parents, the closeness, built-in sitters, an on-call handyman, grandparents who adore her boys. And she has a house that her mom can move through without asking where anything is. She sure is lucky, and she ignores the jokes from Tommy when Ruby has been there all day, or that weird feeling when Ruby is trying to send a message through Katrina instead of sending it herself, or that pause in the mirror when she realizes she doesn't really know what she wants, literally ever. But there was one evening. The boys had finally went to bed. Tommy was half dozing on the couch. Katrina sat at her kitchen table with her phone in hand, but she was doing absolutely nothing with it. She doesn't scroll or text her mom, submit a grocery order, or check the calendar. She just sits and stares at the green clock on the microwave. 8:53. The house is quiet enough that she can only hear the refrigerator hum. And for a few moments, something settles in her that she doesn't have a name for. Now, it's definitely not peace. It's more like a faint awareness that she's in her own kitchen, inside of a life that doesn't belong to her. This feeling is so fragile and fleeting, but from time to time, she can almost turn towards it. But then her phone buzzes, or the dryer cycle ends, or Tommy asks if she's going to come to bed. And just like that, the feeling slips away. By morning, Katrina won't even have words for it. She'll smile, she'll tell herself how lucky she is, she'll stay busy, and she'll keep moving. By spring, no one has to argue about the pattern anymore. It's running this family. By the time Mother's Day comes, the sick kids, they're not even the point. What matters is how fast everything shifts once the text goes out. No discussion or a plan B, just everyone falling into place. And for Brandon and Rachel, that's the moment everything starts to break wide open. They have spent their whole lives talking themselves out of what they actually felt. Now they're left staring at something so clear, so ugly, so impossible to unsee that the family everyone wanted to join will never look the same again. This is where part 2 ends, because part 3 is where this family can't call this random anymore. The pattern stops hiding in small moments and it lands right out in the open on a holiday where no one can explain it away. And once that happens, the question is no longer, does Ruby have a favorite? The question is, what does it cost everyone else around to live in that truth? We'll also learn, why does Brandon's childhood go dark around every place except one? And whether the child everyone thought had already won is sitting on a golden throne or sitting in a golden cage.